Picture this. You're a car enthusiast in 1995, and you've just watched Initial D for the first time. You're obsessed with the AE86, dreaming of owning a Skyline GTR, fantasizing about drifting an RX7 through mountain passes. There's just one problem. None of these cars are available in America, and even if you could get one shipped over, the government would crush it. Welcome to the 25-year import rule, a law that turned JDM cars into forbidden fruit. The single piece of legislation that shaped American car culture for decades, creating a thriving black market, launched countless businesses, and turned ordinary Japanese cars into six-figure collectibles. Today, we're diving deep into the rule that made waiting 25 years feel like a prison sentence for car enthusiasts. To understand the 25-year rule, we need to travel back to the 1980s. American automakers were getting destroyed by Japanese competitions. Honda, Toyota, and Nissan were building cars that were more reliable, more fuel efficient, and often more desirable than anything Detroit could produce. By 1988, the situation had become critical for American manufacturers. Japanese cars weren't just competing, they were dominating. Something had to be done to protect the domestic auto industry, and that something became the Motor Vehicle Safety Compliance Act. The law was simple. No vehicle could be imported for road use unless it was at least 25 years old or had been specifically certified for the American market. The stated purpose was safety, ensuring that imported vehicles met American safety and emission standards. The real purpose was economic protection, creating a barrier that would keep foreign cars out of American showrooms and American driveways. The 25-year rule didn't emerge from nowhere. It was a direct response to the gray market imports of the 1980s, particularly Mercedes-Benz vehicles that were significantly cheaper in Europe than in America. Entrepreneurs discovered they could import European Mercedes models, modify them to meet U.S. standards, and sell them for thousands less than official Mercedes dealers. The gray market was booming, and it was costing manufacturers millions in lost sales. Mercedes-Benz lobbied hard for legislation to stop these imports, and they got exactly what they wanted. The Imported Vehicle Safety Compliance Act of 1988 effectively killed the gray market overnight. But it also created an unintended consequence that would haunt car enthusiasts for decades. It made modern foreign cars completely inaccessible to American buyers. The 25-year rule operates on a simple principle. A vehicle becomes exempt from federal safety and emission standards once it reaches 25 years of age. This means a 1998 Skyline GTR became legally imported in 2023, while a 1999 model remains forbidden until 2024. The rule is enforced by multiple agencies. The Department of Transportation handles safety compliances, the EPA manages emission standards, and Customs and Border Protection physically inspects imports. Getting caught trying to import a non-compliant vehicle can result in crushing fines and federal charges. There are exemptions, but they're extremely limited. Show and display permits for historically significant vehicles, race cars for track use only, and vehicles imported by manufacturers for testing. The show and display exemptions allows the import of certain historically or technologically significant vehicles in extremely limited numbers. We're talking fewer than 500 units ever manufactured. This exemption has allowed a handful of cars like the R34 GTR V-Spec to be legally imported, but the requirements are so strict that most enthusiasts will never qualify. Where there's demand and artificial scarcity, black markets emerge. The 25-year rule created a thriving underground economy of illegal JDM imports with prices that reflected the enormous risks involved. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, illegal Skylines, Silvias, and other forbidden JDM cars commanded astronomical prices. A Skyline GTR that cost $40,000 in Japan might sell for $80,000 or more in America, assuming you could find someone willing to risk federal prosecution to import it. The legal import business attracted everyone from legitimate businesses willing to bend the rules to outright criminals using car imports to launder money. Some importers used creative interpretations of the law, claiming cars were for off-road use only or temporarily imported for show. Others simply falsified paperwork, changed VIN numbers, and bribed officials. The risks were enormous, but so were the profits. In 1999, a California company called Motorex achieved what seemed impossible. They became the first and only company to legally import and federalize modern Skyline GTRs. Through a combination of engineering expertise and regulatory navigation, Motorex obtained NHTSA approval to modify R33 and R34 GTRs for American roads. For a brief shining moment, American enthusiasts could legally buy a federalized Skyline GTR. Motorex imported hundreds of vehicles and seemed poised to revolutionize JDM imports. Then, everything collapsed. In 2005, federal investigators discovered that Motorex had been cutting corners on their federalization process. The company had been approved only for R33 GTRs, but had been importing R34s under the same certification. Worse, they hadn't been performing all the required safety modifications they claimed to be doing. The government shut down Motorex, seized remaining inventory, and launched a campaign to track down and potentially crush previously imported vehicles. The Motorex scandal made federal agencies even more suspicious of import companies and effectively ended hopes for legal, modern JDM imports. The 25-year rule created something unique in automotive culture: countdown anticipation. Enthusiasts began tracking exactly when their dream cars would become legal, creating elaborate spreadsheets and countdown timers for specified models and production dates. The first legally imported R32 GTR arrived in 2014, creating a media sensation and triggering a rush of imports. Suddenly, the car that had been forbidden fruit for decades was available at any licensed importer, and prices reflected decades of pent-up demand. January 1st became like Christmas morning for JDM enthusiasts as each new year brought fresh models into legal import territory. The countdown culture created its own economy. Import businesses began pre-ordering popular models years before they became eligible, while enthusiasts started saving money and researching specific chassis numbers for cars they couldn't buy for years. The 25-year rule transformed ordinary Japanese cars into collectible investments. Cars that sold for $5,000 in Japan were commanding $25,000 or more once legally imported to America. The artificial scarcity created by the waiting period meant that demand far exceeded supply. R32 GTRs that cost $15,000 in Japan were selling for $40,000 plus in America by 2015. The price explosion affected every aspect of the JDM market. Not only were the cars themselves expensive, but parts, maintenance, and expertise became premium services. Shops specializing in JDM vehicles could charge premium rates because they were working on rare, expensive machines. The rule also created regional price variations. West Coast importers had advantages due to proximity to Japanese ports, while East Coast buyers often paid significant transportation premiums on top of already inflated prices. Today's legal JDM import market is a sophisticated industry. Professional importers maintain relationships with Japanese dealers, conduct pre-purchase inspections via video, and handle the complex logistics of international shipping and customs clearance. The process typically works like this: importers identify desirable vehicles in Japan, purchase them at auction or from dealers, handle Japanese export procedures, arrange shipping, clear American customs, and provide state registration assistance. The entire process usually takes 2 to 3 months and costs $3,000 to $5,000 in fees on top of the vehicle purchase price. Modern importers have turned the 25-year rule from an obstacle into a business opportunity. Companies like Japanese Classics, Top Rank, and Duncan Imports have built substantial businesses around the 25-year rule, developing expertise in specific models and building reputations for quality imports. The JDM import calendar for the next few years reads like a greatest hits album. The R34 GTR becomes fully eligible in 2024 and 2025, the Honda NSX-R in 2027, and the Toyota Supra RZ in 2028. Each of these arrivals is expected to create market frenzies. 2024, 2025, the R34 represents the holy grail of JDM imports. Is the final generation of the legendary GTR before Nissan's hiatus and the star of Fast and Furious movies. Demand is astronomical. Early examples are already selling for six figures in anticipation. These represent the pinnacle of Japanese sports car engineering from their respective eras. The NSX-R's track-focused purity and the Supra's legendary tuning potential make them highly anticipated imports. 25-year rule is uniquely American in its strictness. Canada uses a 15-year rule, allowing JDM imports a full decade earlier than the U.S. European countries generally allow imports as long as vehicles meet local safety and emission standards, regardless of age. The international variation creates interesting market dynamics. Canadian importers often serve as intermediaries, bringing cars from Japan to Canada, then re-exporting to the U.S. once they become 25-year eligible. The American rule is among the most restrictive in the developed world, making our JDM import market unique in its intensity and pricing. Despite decades of complaints from enthusiasts, the 25-year rule shows no signs of changing. The American auto industry still benefits from the protection it provides, and there's little potential incentive to modify a law that affects a relatively small number of car enthusiasts. The rule has created an entire ecosystem of businesses. Import companies, specialty mechanics, parts suppliers, and modification shops all exist because of artificial scarcity created by the waiting period. JDM cars have achieved mythical status partly because they were forbidden, creating demand that might not have existed if they'd been freely available all along. For JDM enthusiasts, the rule has created a culture of patience and planning. Successful collectors identify target vehicles years in advance, research specific chassis numbers, and build relationships with importers. The 25-year import rule represents one of the most significant influences on American car culture in the past 3 decades. By making JDM cars forbidden fruit, it transformed them from ordinary transportation into objects of intense desire and speculation. The rule has created winners and losers, legitimate businesses and criminal enterprises, patient enthusiasts, and impulsive lawbreakers. It has made some cars incredibly valuable while keeping others completely inaccessible. Most importantly, the 25-year rule proves how government regulation can have unintended cultural consequences that extend far beyond the original policy goals. Whether you love it or hate it, the 25-year rule has fundamentally shaped how Americans interact with Japanese cars, creating a unique market dynamic that exists nowhere else in the world. The next time you see an R32 GTR or AE86 at a car meet, remember, car represents not just Japanese engineering, but also decades of waiting, planning, and navigating one of America's most influential automotive laws. What's your take on the 25-year rule? Necessary safety protection or outdated protectionism? Are you currently waiting for a specific JDM car to become legal? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more deep dives into the laws and loopholes that shape our car culture.